Yo, let's jump into this joint, yo. Freaking let me just read this little statement just so people understand where the episode's coming from to provide some context. Sean Diddy Combs on No Filter with Naomi expressed his concern with presidential candidate Joe Biden and the Democratic Party in regards to the black vote. Diddy urged black voters to withhold their votes if their interests don't align with presidential candidate Joe Biden's agenda. Diddy said, we're going to have, excuse me, we're going to have to see some promises. We're going to have to understand what kind of deal we're getting out of. What are we getting in return for our vote? Nothing has changed in America for black Americans. And in order for us to vote for Biden, we can't be taken for granted like we always are because we're supposed to be Democrats or because people are afraid of Trump. It's because at this point, we can't trust politicians. Question number one, should we follow Diddy's lead and withhold our vote if Biden doesn't promise any tangible to African Americans, any tangibles?
What is this tangibles though?
Tangibles 2020.
I'm trying to understand what
So pretty much what it means is just, does Biden have an agenda for the black community, which he did release earlier this week. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check the website called Lift Every Voice, the Biden Plan for Black America. All right. And so pretty much it sounds like everything that all the other candidates were saying, where he puts an emphasis on small businesses, but instead of being the focus of black people, it's always talking about minority owned. And so, in my opinion, anyways, with the exception of putting more money into HBCUs, which Trump is already doing, the plan's no different. And so that's why I'm like, although I think Biden did this in response to Diddy, I still don't think his plan is enough.
So you're saying he took the same plan that they had from where it was like minority, but they just replaced minority with African.
My thing is this: when we get into this whole, Democrats, we need to see something from the Democrats, right? Fair enough. You should feel like you're getting something for your vote, right? But at the same time, for me, it doesn't make any sense to only focus on the Democratic Party when this is a two-party race. I think the right question is, which party is providing anything, if at all, towards black people? And my question would be, what is the Republican Party's platform for black America? We don't hold the Republican Party responsible at all as a community. We just say, look at the Democrats, Democrats, what are you doing for us? And people will say, oh, well, we give them our vote. And that's right. But at the same time, the reason why Black America votes for the Democratic Party is because the Democratic Party talks to black people. At the very least, they engage with the black vote. They work with the black community. When was the last time you saw a Republican candidate full-throatedly talk about the black community, issues within the black community, acknowledge issues within the black community, acknowledge disparities between black Americans and white Americans because of systematic racism? They won't even touch that. And we know why they won't touch that, because it's going to anger their base. They have a base. They know what it is. They have a pro-white America base, and they don't want to talk about that stuff because if they say those things, they're going to lose those folks. So for me, it's more so, at this point, we have two choices. The whole, who's going to do whatever, honestly, it's kind of late. It's really politically naive to even try and hold your vote at the last second, because you should have been more involved in the political process at the jump. You should have had a candidate that you backed and everything. If Diddy really cared about a black pen, he should have had a candidate who was going to put a black pen and then back them through the primary process. But anyways, here we are. There's two choices. So Biden and Trump, who have you seen so far is going to provide more for you? That's the question. If you want to withholding your vote hasn't gotten anybody anything. If anything, it makes you irrelevant, because if you're not voting, you can't do nothing for me. If I'm a politician, if you don't even vote, then why am I talking to you? My whole thing is getting votes to get into office. So not voting doesn't then do anything. You should vote, but you should be, you should have a plan with your vote. So if it's like, look, if it's not Biden or Trump, then we need to all decide on a write-in candidate or somebody, but not voting hasn't done anything.
Can I ask you a question though, Complex? What's the difference of doing a write-in or not voting when you know your write-in is not going to get elected? Because again, we're only like 13% of the population. So,
well, for one thing, voting rolls from the entire spectrum, talking about from local to presidential, matter, because
No, I agree, but I'm talking about in particular.
I'm just
about this
the write-in, right? Well, first off, that's what I'm saying, right? So it's like almost, I guess, a zero-sum game. Like if you say, well, look, it's either or, really, because a non-vote for Biden may be a vote for Trump. So you got to look at yourself as what is going to benefit me the most? Which presidential candidate is going to benefit me the most at the end of the day? If I truly don't care about either one, you think Trump and Biden are going to be the same? Then more power to you. Go for it. Then vote for Trump. Why not? You know what I mean? But if you believe that one of them is actually going to have your interests at heart better than the other one, or at least has some sort of inkling is going to be somewhat useful to you as opposed to the other one, then that's who you should vote for. But the thing is this, voting matters because when you vote, it shows that you're politically engaged. And that means that candidates are going to come talk to you because they need your vote. So even if I didn't vote for you, but the fact that you showed up, it's like, look, this person, I can switch them maybe. But if you don't even show up, I can't switch you because you're not even engaged enough to go show up at the polls the day of. You know why they talk to old people so much? Because old people vote. Old people go at every single election and vote no matter what because they ain't got nothing else better to do. But that's why they go to nursing homes and talk to people because they want the people who are going to show up and vote. If I can at least convince you, then I know I can use you to get the vote, and then I'll listen to you. So you have to vote. Withholding your vote, withholding the vote ain't gonna do nothing for anybody, for any group, and it's really silly. Honestly, you're just gonna shoot yourself in the foot.
I actually disagree with you.
Okay,
because I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Withholding the vote is in fact voting. It's just a different strategy to voting because currently Democrats rely on the black vote, specifically the black church. You know, they go like, hey, we're going to get this vote regardless. Hence, that's why when they do a black run, they always go to the mega churches and the larger churches in the South, right? Which Joe Biden has done, and that's how he won the primary. However, this is the difference. If, in fact, we could convince the older black people, the religious black people, like, hey, you know what? Instead of just always going Democrat or instead of always just picking the lesser of the two evils, how about we say, hey, this is what we want for this election. Will you verbally commit to what we want for our vote? I'm just saying, provide the opportunity from each candidate to say, yes, I will, or no, I will not, right? So now I hear what you're saying, like before, hey, Republicans don't really provide anything for black people, right? However, we know that of them. What we know from Democrats is, please vote for me, and I promise you something, but we're not going to really give you anything. You get what I'm saying? So then now it's like, when I hear Diddy saying this, it's like out of all people, I was actually shocked that Diddy said this. But I respect it even more because this is a guy who
wasn't Diddy the one that had like that whole wasn't Diddy the one that used to have that whole rock the vote?
Exactly, vote or die. You know what I mean? So like,
vote or die.
The fact that he's doing this, right? That he's been, remember, he was the guy pushing Obama hard body. You know, and so Diddy should be the guy that be pushing Obama's VP. But he's not. Why? Because it's clear as day. Like anybody could see it. For one, I'm gonna be shocked if Biden even gets the vote. But if we do vote for this guy, I know for a fact Biden's not gonna do much for us anyways. Let's just be real. So then now it's like, why do we just always hand over our vote to the Democratic Party every 4 years? And the argument's always the same narrative. Lesser of the two evils. You know, we have to vote out tyranny. This, that, and the third. And it's just like, yo, what are y'all talking about? We're still at the bottom, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican.
Not only that, but what's going to be more difficult this season is the fact that when Trump said, what the hell do you have to lose to the black community? He was 100% right. And the fact of the matter is, and this is a straight fact, it's not even opinion based. I'm looking at the numbers here. Historic low unemployment amongst black Americans. And
that changed now, so
but this is this is what you call
I'm just joking, man. Go ahead,
aside from the Black Swan event that has happened, you're talking about a historic number that just kept becoming more and more historic as the months went on. And then on top of that, I'm seeing that the pay rate also for black Americans rose significantly under Trump. So, and this is without him doing a bunch of
Yo, man, send me that link, man.
I was about to say, I would love to see that pay scale number, but anyways.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can send that to you, but the point is, this is without him doing all of the, I want to say shucking and jiving, for lack of a better word, that the Democrats tend to do when it comes to this kind of thing. Like, they love to make like this big scenes and, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Trump just kind of say, yo, what you gotta lose, comes into office, does what he has to do amongst all the controversy, and still we see these significant, undeniable economic improvements within the working class of Black community that it's hard to argue with. Some people try to say, oh, that's those were Obama's policies that were the result of that, and blah, blah, blah. But just like how people will blame Trump when he's in office for bad things, I think there needs to be a genuine stride to give him credit for the good things while he's actively in office.
Can I ask a question? Prior to Trump's when Trump stepped in, you said he brought in low unemployment and the Black people, right? So prior to Trump, was there not already low Black unemployment? Because when he stepped in, there was already low Black unemployment, right? So
perhaps
the historic,
there was.
Well, not perhaps, it's a fact, because if he stepped in and it was low, right, then that means the previous historic low was under President Obama, who was a Democrat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So saying that, oh, what do you have to lose? If you're talking about low unemployment numbers, that means that started from Obama. That means that, and this is one thing, nobody wants to give Obama credit, but right, if Obama was able to get historic lows up until that point, and then Trump continued that, then it doesn't mean that Trump's Republican policies necessarily created low unemployment specifically for Blacks. It means that's a carryover from the previous administration.
Yeah, but let's remember that there are a couple of things that significantly changed the trajectory of the economy when Trump came in, and mainly that was dismantling the Affordable Care Act as much as it could be done. And then the second thing was enacting certain tax cuts or tax incentives.
The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
And therefore then need workers. Yeah, so it's like, while unemployment may have been low under Obama, there's no denying that between, oh shit, I'm wondering if I got a virus on my computer, yo.
That's why you gotta get the max, man.
All types of stuff is going on.
What kind of websites you be on?
Them websites, they catch up with
My fault. Hold on, yo.
Nah, no worries.
You gotta go in incognito mode. So don't download the cookies and stuff.
You be on MAGA,
When things just start acting up as if somebody's controlling your computer.
Gotta lay off that MAGA XXX, bruh. You know?
MAGA XXX.
Breaking up.
Yo, listen.
You good, Dre? I don't know, man. You looking like you froze.
Nah, he's there. Oh no, never mind. I think he might have froze.
Yeah, he froze. But
he definitely froze.
To piggyback off of what Dre was saying, though, to give Trump his small amount of credit, I've watched 3 of his State of the Unions, right? 3 of those addresses, and all 3. Well, I'll say probably 75% of those 3 addresses have been towards African Americans. So it seems to me he has an indirect way of like either combating the Democratic Party from receiving the Black vote, or he's really actively campaigning to African Americans to vote for him.
We asked for tangibles, right? Tangibles 2020. What are the tangibles from Donald Trump? Let's not just say the Republican Party, because that's a big, broad thing, right? And maybe you can educate me, because...
No. I will say this.
What is
correct? None of them are providing tangibles. However, the same thing that Biden is pushing is what Trump's already currently doing in office. That's the difference.
Is he though? So first off,
I'll read one thing. You know what Biden wants to do? He said, expand the new market tax credit, make the program permanent, and double community development financial institutions, CDFI funding. What is the difference between this, right, and opportunity zones? When it's literally the same thing, they just reword it.
Can you say that again?
The new market tax credit, make the program permanent, and double community development financial institutions, CDFI funding. The new markets tax credit has helped draw tens of billions of dollars in new capital to low-income communities, providing tax credits to investors in community development organizations that support everything from supermarkets to real estate projects to manufacturing plants. As part of his plan to reinvest in communities across the country, including in rural areas, Biden will also double funding for the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, which supports local, mission-driven financial institutions in low-income areas around the U.S.
Right.
This builds what? Say it again.
No, so that's right. Yeah.
Okay, but pretty much it's the same thing. You know,
I disagree. I don't think it's the same thing as an opportunity zone.
Okay.
For me, an opportunity zone is particularly an investment vehicle that you could drive money as long as you put it within. They've had this thing before: empowerment zones, opportunity zones. If you buy like some real estate, you get it tax free, and then when you hold it a certain amount of time, you get it completely free. This is in particular is saying funding for actual businesses within the community. From my reading of it, like we can debate particulars.
But then opportunity zones do the very same thing, where they literally were.
Are you saying opportunity zone is a tangible?
No, that's not what I said at all.
Opportunity. No, I think you're
the same things.
No,
it's
not.
I just want to bring it back to the question real quick because it says, should we follow Diddy's lead and withhold our vote if Biden doesn't promise any tangibles? Is there anything on his site that you can consider a tangible?
No, because everything that he's pushing is towards minority businesses, not exclusively African-American businesses or Black businesses. So then now this whole
his focus is more the economy.
Exactly. Well, yes. Yeah, you're right. But what I'm saying is his quote-unquote Black agenda isn't necessarily a Black agenda at all. You know,
are we talking about Biden here?
Yeah,
Biden.
I'm back. I don't know.
Like even one thing he has is supporting African-American churches during the COVID-19 crisis. Like,
well, you know, Biden caught a lot of heat for literally repeating things that Trump was going to do or had done, and then taking them, even though he had at one point criticized Trump for certain things, and then end up like riding Trump's coattails with some of the programs that he was implementing. So
like what?
Come again?
Like what? What did he do? What did Biden take?
So there was, you know, during the whole COVID-19 thing, there were things that Trump had actively done that Biden said that should be done. And then when people stepped back and were like, yo, but this is what Trump has been doing. Like Biden, you know, as we know, he's been making kind of like weird statements like, yo, Trump should have acted sooner and shut things down sooner. But then when it comes to the fact that Trump started shutting things down January 28th or whatever, you know, he didn't give him credit for that. He said, oh, Trump didn't shut things down soon enough. But then in another statement, he'll say he should have shut things down sooner and then not acknowledge the fact that he did it on the 29th of January. So Biden has a way of saying one thing as if he doesn't understand what's going on and expecting everyone to just jump on his bandwagon because he's Biden. And then when he's presented with certain facts, he tries to explain it away and does a bunch of humming and hawing, and then ends up saying absolutely nothing, as we've seen him do.
Well, you guys have done a number of episodes on COVID, so I won't even get into that. But what's funny is that if you talk about somebody who tries to explain away things, and then it just like Trump is the master of that. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Listen.
When you pin Trump on something, he's like, "But what? Whatever," and then he just like brushes it away. But
well, here's so I can see that your angle is that Trump has issues. I don't know what your political leanings are, but I can see that you have an angle that Trump isn't doing much for Black people, or, you know, he shouldn't be considered a candidate that should be voted for by Black people. I'm just trying to understand from your point of view, how is Biden better? How is he the alternative for Blacks? Or who is?
This is my standpoint. And I said this in the last time when we talked about the primaries. I think we have a real issue in our country right now, right? Where you have a lot of working class people who are barely above water. If anything, they're underwater, right? We have a real issue with debt, especially at the college level, with underemployment, with people who are employed but doing like a lot of gig economy jobs. Yeah, you're driving for Uber. Yeah, you're working at an Amazon facility. But a lot of people can't even afford within their cities to pay their rent off of a job, one job. whether it be if you're working a regular job, 40 hours a week with minimum wage, you can't afford to live in a lot of major American cities. So what we have here is an issue where the working class is struggling. From my viewpoint, Trump is only focused on the upper class and 1%, and I'll tell you why. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was supposed to bring in a ton of money to create jobs and whatever and help the middle class person, right? However, especially as we can see, when everything cracked under this COVID-19, mostly what that did is help companies just buy back their shares. It just made the richer companies even richer. Companies have just made more money through this Tax Cuts Act. It hasn't actually done anything for the middle class person. Sure, you get a couple percentage back on your tax return because you're not paying or whatever the taxes. But what happens when stuff really hits the fan? Do people have enough to make it by? And as you can see, people are struggling now. People don't have savings. People don't have access to credit, and people can't afford just to live normal lives.
Yeah, so but you have to realize something that what you're saying partly is a part of, and you'll notice this with a lot of my arguments, a part of what you're saying has to do with choice, right? There are major industries. Let's take, for example, the airline industry. They've made billions and billions and billions of dollars over time. They could have set aside money for emergency funds, just like anybody else, right? They didn't do that. Instead, they spent all their money however they spent it. Billions of dollars, and now they're in a situation where they're going to be wiped out possibly because of this. Same thing happened with society. I was reading articles that said COVID exposed people's bad financial decisions because a lot of people had no savings in the bank in order to save themselves.
Oh, Dre, come on, man. All right, listen.
I mean, but hold on.
Hold on, but Dre, can I just ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
Were you okay with the government bailing out the airline industry?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, okay. All right, just making sure. No, go ahead.
Okay.
The reason why those things happen, the reason why we have taxes, right, is the purpose of a government is to create order and structure, right? Mm-hmm. And they're supposed to provide a safety net for people, right? What Trump was doing was like, look, what the Republican whole idea is, let's smaller government, let people just free choice, right? It's like a train that's on a track with no rails, nothing to keep it in place. Less regulation, right? We want less regulation, just free business, go ahead and do your thing. But then what happens is that when the train falls off the tracks, there's nothing to save it. So now the government steps in anyway. So you lowered all these taxes, right? Because that was supposed to help things get better and the economy was going to buzz, even though we had an already amazing economy that when he stepped in. So let's just drop taxes and let things go even faster.
We had an amazing economy when Trump stepped in.
When things go off the rails now, the government has to step in anyway. So you guys lowered all these taxes. You guys let all these companies get all these buybacks. Then when things go sideways, you come in and bail them out anyways. The whole point is that if they had just taken the tax money as it was used already, right, and used it for programs to help make sure people were going to be okay, you wouldn't have this issue right now. But because they lower taxes and didn't really help with the budget deficit, which we still have, which is a huge budget deficit, now when things hit the fan, you still have to come bail these companies out. So
no, you don't. First of all, you don't have to bail anybody out.
Bro, you have to bail out the airline industry, bro.
You don't have to bail out the airline industry.
Get the fuck out of here. Yo, listen, there's certain industries that just can't fail, bro. Like the
too big to fail.
The airline industry, yeah, they're too big to fail. Like it's not possible because they would devastate America. Like our economy would be destroyed. There's no way we could do that, especially if we're competing against China. It's not possible.
Right.
Nah, I agree.
Exactly. I mean, this is my thing about Republicans. It's like, oh yeah, let's lower regulation, right? But then when things go sideways, the government's going to step in anyways. Exactly. So why didn't we just keep that tax revenue? And then you're saying it's personal choice, right? Well, the businesses made the wrong choice by not spending it on the right thing, by not investing in the right things. So then the government's going to end up coming to save you anyways. And
I'm not a proponent of government coming in to save businesses, right? I'm not a proponent of that.
But they have to. They have to.
Your libertarian politicians have recently.
Well, what I'm trying to say is it's not. Well, yes. So to a degree, they have to because society has been set up in such a way that if some of these businesses went under, then there's major disruption, right? Major disruption. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's one point. But to the point of the government is set up to provide a safety net. That's also, from my point of view, not an entirely true statement. Government is not here to provide a safety net for everybody so that we can all sing kumbaya and live without any problems in our lives. I mean,
so Dre, you feel like Biden doesn't owe us any tangibles? I guess so.
I'm trying to say, here's what I'm trying to say. How much welfare is enough welfare? How much programs are enough programs? No, this is a serious question.
All right, how about this? All right,
how much more can you give people and then say, here, go be great?
All right, how about this? Depending on the time of the day or the day of the week, you ask me this question, I flip-flop. This is where I'm honest. Because I can see both sides. I have progressive thoughts and I have probably some conservative thoughts on the way we should operate, the government and our economy, right? But this is where I'll give Andrew Yang some credit.
My boy.
Yo, I'm going to say this.
Andrew Yang, yo.
What happens in the near future, now mind you, in the near future, when artificial intelligence just decimates, wow. What happens when artificial intelligence, right, decimate industry?
Gang. Yep.
And then now people who are in those positions can no longer work because they've been replaced by, a robot or a machine, right? Something has to give. We have to have something in place from the federal government, the state as well, but definitely from the federal government to keep a lot of these families afloat, bro. Like, because we're going to lose a lot of jobs.
But you're also not factoring
Tesla is
in.
talking about having trucks, like Mack trucks, drive themselves, right? That's one industry that populated by a lot of black male drivers, right? Imagine they all lose their jobs. What are they supposed to do? You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
there's
but
a lot of
who's
things.
Build the trucks? Who's going to build the trucks? Who's gonna
Tesla infrastructure?
I'm saying but who's building the trucks to
robots.
build
Hold on.
I think it's still factory made.
Listen. All in a factory now. It's like, remember, like, did you see the last Terminator movie? I know I'm bringing up.
I get where you're going.
Remember that scene when they were in Mexico, and then the main character's brother gets fired because they're like, we no longer need you. We have a machine that could do your position. They needed her because she was good, I think, at math, and so they were like, you know what? We need engineers. That's all they need. They no longer need like people going like, oh, put this together with this, put this together with that. They probably, if anything, they only need one person to supervise the machines to make sure there's no glitches. Right?
There's got to be a way our society can take care of our older generation who has to be phased out of these older practices and take care of the newer generations.
Yeah, but the proposal is give them money, give them housing. But
I don't think
what does that solve?
I don't think.
Hold on, Dre. I don't think you're realizing what's about to happen.
Yeah, but this is still.
There's going to be a lot of jobs. Poof, gone. Like,
but they said the same thing about the coming in the millennia. Like by 2020, certain things were supposed to happen, right? So
we're not talking about like prophecy and shit.
I'm not talking about prophecy. I'm talking about
think about this right now. We have Uber, right? What happens when Uber drivers are replaced literally just by the GPS system and the car is automated and it just drives on its own? What I'm saying is,
I understand your point. What I'm trying to ask you is, how is the solution to that money and housing?
You have to give people something to survive, or they revolt.
That is not a solution.
I can tell you how
that's the best solution I could come up with.
I can tell you how that helps at the very least, right? Opposed as to whatever alternative. When you provide, first off, housing and money, one, you make sure there's not families in the streets, right? You don't have people trying to send their kids to school without a place to live. Where, that's the most frustrating thing, is to try and learn when you're on an empty stomach and you got no place to live, right? And then two, when you still give people money, why did the government just give $1,200 to everybody? Because they need to keep the economy going. When you give cash into people's hands, they spend it, meaning they spend it locally around where they are. That means the local bodega gets some money. That means that the local mechanic gets some money. That means that the hair salon down the street gets some money. And that means money can circulate. A lot of people live through pass-through money. They may not have a lot of wealth, but the money exchanges hands within at least the community, which keeps things going for services. Because if you're going to take away a lot of the manufacturing jobs, which we don't really have now, you have a service-related economy, which means that people need money to keep that going. So at the very least, by putting money in people's hands, even if you tax it from the major corporations, which are making buku dollars anyways, and you give it into the actual citizens' hands, they can spend it. And pass it around
But that's
each
not
other.
value. That's not value. As a matter of fact, again, this idea that giving everybody money because of COVID and then it's supposed to stimulate the economy. A lot of economists believe, sure, there'll be some money circulated, but what's coming after, what is about to come after this is going to be a lot more problematic than the temporary Band-Aid. And that is inflation, right? The money becoming less usable and less valuable because of this flood of money in the marketplace. And so that's not really solving anything. I think it was really more of a psychological move more than wise economic policy.
You're right about too much spending will create inflation. But at the same time, what you have to realize is that the government has been spending a lot of this money already. It's just in different places that doesn't actually affect the bottom line, which is the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't think about this is what I love about Republicans. They're going to harp on a lady who gets some Section 8 housing and some food stamps, right? But we don't talk about the tax cuts to places like Amazon, where people are shopping around, offering them billions upon billions of dollars. So why is it that we're going to offer a major corporation multiple billions of dollars to come set up shop in a place where a lot of those constituents don't even have the money to go to college to get the degree to work at that corporation? But I'm going to focus on this single mom
complex. And to add, that same company that devastates small businesses in those areas.
Right. But I'm going to focus. Forget that. I'm going to focus on this lady who's got Section 8 housing and food stamps for her kids. It's like, it's crazy. We vilify people who are poor and through no fault of their own.
That's not necessary. Well, I mean, that's apples and oranges, to be quite honest. While I don't agree with supplementing corporations heavily like this, at the end of the day, the economy and the tax code is set up in such a way that you either understand how it works or you don't understand how it works. It's really that simple. And if you have a business and you're a corporation and you get to certain levels, there are just going to be built.
It makes the rich richer. That's what kind of society we're living in, where you have to have money to become rich.
You may be right. You may be right that it makes the rich richer, but these are the same rich, a lot of people at the same time who want to become rich. A lot of black people want to become rich. Why do they want to become rich?
Stop. But
why do black
people? Yeah, you're right. Everyone wants to become rich, bro.
But why?
The reality
because
is,
it's a pipe dream.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The reality
so then the alternative to becoming rich is to put some governmental body in front of us as daddy and go, you provide for me. That's the alternative.
This is what I'm going to say. I'm going to say this. The French Revolution, when the rich hoard all the wealth and people in the street are starving, like literally starving, then people go out on the street and start shooting shit up. That's what's going to happen. So that's why the government has to put these welfares and other initiatives in place to calm the poor. You know what I mean? And so I hear what you're saying, but in reality, every government needs this to a degree.
It's not just, and also, like, I hate when this is like, it's just to make a daddy, whatever, just to survive.
It doesn't matter. I don't mean daddy I'm saying it's an entity that has to provide for us versus
it's a safety net. It's a bottom line that, look, people living in America we shouldn't have this many homeless. We shouldn't have this many people struggling to live, right?
Country.
Yeah, but
this isn't a third world country.
This is cosmic. This is that whole idea of cosmic justice, right? We shouldn't be suffering. We shouldn't have hunger.
No. This isn't like some, Buddhism. Life is suffering.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
but at the same time,
the message was to come to fruition. There would be no homeless. There would be no one struggling and no one hungry, and everyone would have a house and money to spend. That means what? Life is great now. There's no issue.
That's pretty good. I think that's pretty. It doesn't solve every issue, but those are issues that we can solve. That's solvable. And my point is this. My point is this.
Let me have a conference. I say real quick.
My point is this.
Isn't that what socialist communist countries?
No, I don't know. No, but this is my point. You need to give people. This is America, the land of opportunity, the land of second chances, right? You need to give people a baseline to stand upon. Right? If you don't have something to stand upon, you can't change anything around. So at the very least, if you give that homeless guy housing and at least something to eat, then he can start thinking about, okay, how can I get up better? But if his main focus is how do I just get a house, I can't even find structure to live, then he can't innovate. He can't do anything for you. He's
So let me
completely
ask you a
useless.
question.
Yeah, his body's gonna respond to what
You're right. So let me ask you a question. Because I think sometimes, and this is why I think you guys have to have my wife on the show, because her line of work is social work, and she has been in the highest levels of this work. She knows what goes on with money and poverty because she's seen it and she worked with it firsthand. And when she has from having 13 years in that industry, she sees it so differently because of the abuse. She knows homeless people get housing, food, cash. And what do they do with that once they get it? They still squander it. Drugs, alcohol, whatever vices they have. They still squander that and then come back for more. She's seen it time and time again. Or they might get all of those things and then still go to the corner and pretend as if they have nothing, right? And beg for money and act as if they don't have a house to stay in, when that same person is literally getting cash benefits from the state, the feds. They have housing, they have food, they have free programs. So what I'm trying to say is there's this perception that everyone who is in need is not getting anything, and once they get it, then
any of us said that.
No, but I'm saying what I'm saying is this idea that if they have stable ground, so you can't force someone even with stable ground.
Yeah, but Dre, you're talking about a drug addict, bro.
I'm not talking about drug addicts. I'm not just talking.
That's what you brought up your wife for a reason, because you're talking about
she
those
deals
drug
with
addicts that
no, it's not just drug addicts. It's not just drug addicts. It's people who come to America and they don't have anything. Immigrants, right? Whether documented or undocumented. People who come here, they don't have anything, they don't have any family, and they know immediately. They know because of the people that have already been here and gamed the system, they know where they have to go, what they have to say, and what they have to do to get a certain amount of benefits. And then you have people who are in the middle class who they get taxed out the wazoo, and they don't have to, they have to do certain things that a certain class of people don't have to do. So in a sense, when you say stable ground to do something, well, how has the stable ground of welfare helped Black people for the last 50 years or so?
Well, this is the question, right? I know you like to focus on the people who have squandered the system and misused the system. And I agree. I can't say that everybody's an angel. There are people who are going to misuse the system, right? But at the same time, there are success stories out of there. There are people who, because they had housing and a school, free schooling and things like that, were able to make something out of themselves, right? And that's the point. You're not going to save everybody. Not everybody's going to become, it doesn't work like that. There's not going to be everybody's an engineer and they all make six figures and everybody lives well. Things don't work that way, right? There's going to be people who are underclass, right? And that's just a fact. However, can we give those people a fair opportunity to succeed in the future? That's the point. Can I give this person a fair opportunity?
But is there a price? You see, you're saying that's the point. And while I agree, myself, G, I don't know Rome's story, but I can tell you, I didn't grow up with the silver spoon. G didn't grow up with the silver spoon.
Silver spoon.
We both grew up in the same hoods. We both were in the SNAP program, all of that. We always have this conversation, G.
Hold on, bro. You said you were on the SNAP program? No offense, but I'm
saying like food stamps.
Right. So do you consider yourself a success story?
I'm a success story, but not because of those things.
So you're
fucked up, Dre.
Bro, aren't you a living embodiment?
No.
The simple fact that you're able to get those helping hands.
But that's not true, because what I'm trying to say is that's not the whole story, right? I'm saying I was at one point a recipient of that, but my parents who come from the Caribbean, once they realized what was going on, since there is no social security net in the Caribbean, there is no welfare. When my mother came here and she started to receive those things, her goal was to get off of those things as soon as she could, because it was foreign to her. She was like, what is this? I don't want to be subservient to this.
But that's the point. That's the point of it.
Dre, you're explaining why.
Why that program is helpful. That it's a temporary,
not to stay on it, but to help them.
But here's what I'm trying to say. What has been the price paid for by Black Americans overall because of these programs? Has it been positive or has it been negative? There may be
I will argue more
stories.
positive than negative.
What would be the alternative? Are we a third world country? Do we want people living on the streets? Like,
so
what
let me
is?
give you the
We want
alternative.
it to be like India right now, where it's just a bunch of people living literally on the ground outside.
That's
Right.
But
And
has
shanty
it
towns?
ever been like that in the United States amongst blacks? We just all living outside on the ground? Was it ever like that? Were there periods of ingenuity amongst blacks where we were economically sound and self-sufficient? Were there not periods like that?
Yeah, you know what happened? The federal government shut those shits down, bro. Like,
Yeah, but how did they shut it down? What is the story? What's the major story of why Black America economically became so dependent on the government? It was the introduction of welfare. And then
hold on. What's that?
I don't know the facts on these, yo.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the
I'm trying to
father?
remember the book. It's called the Color of Wealth. I believe it's called The Color.
Mhm.
Rothstein. I have the book. I gotta find it somewhere. The book explains how the racial wealth gap in this country was created by the federal government, and we've talked about this several times, Dre. And I know you know this by now, but you're still trying to play dumb, like you don't understand.
Okay, but I don't know what you're saying. So you gotta explain.
All right. So what I'm saying is this: the federal government gave benefits to white families to move out of the ghettos and to live in the suburbs, but they literally restricted African Americans from doing the same thing, prevented them. And then on top of that, banks were like, hey, we're not even going to insure black homes. So then now the value of your home went down. When it was damaged, you couldn't get it repaired because you couldn't afford the repairs, a number of things. Then on top of that, the federal government said, hey, anybody who goes to World War, I believe it's World War II, anybody that goes to World War II, when you come back, we'll get you a home for the low. Like literally they were like, I think it was like they were giving out like grants for like $10,000 so you could purchase a home, with the exception of African Americans who fought in that war.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So then now it's like we're not even labeled as equals to white people. White people get all the benefits provided by the federal government, while African Americans were pushed aside. That's how the racial wealth gap was created, and beforehand, because there was several examples of where white people just ran up in successful black towns and just burnt the place up, lynched successful black people, all kind of things across the United States. You gotta understand, like, remember, the reason why a lot of black people from the South moved up north was because of all of the attacks and the assaults that were going on by jealous white people in those neighborhoods.
Okay, so then to your point,
racism,
to your point, right? We now have a society that black people, a large proportion of us, live on social assistance, right? So
I want to see those numbers. I think that's a misnomer. And
Okay.
what's more is that there's actually, in terms of temporary assistance for needy families and SNAP program and all that stuff, the majority is actually Caucasians in mostly southern Republican states.
So what is your position on what is your position right now on Black America in terms of economically and what we have access to?
We need to close the racial wealth gap, right?
And
the fact of the matter is,
what is the racial wealth gap?
The racial wealth gap is the difference between the net worth of a white family versus a black family. They say in Boston, the average black family has $8 net worth. The main reason for that is, like what G said, is a difference in housing. When people came here in the 1920s, up to the 1920s, up to the 1940s, there was a number of social programs that were made specifically for blacks. I mean, not for blacks, for white people, which helped them get housing, which helped them set them up and help them get into the higher wealth brackets, right? So the fact of the matter is that we need to get more black people into homes. And actually, what's funny is looking at Biden's plan, he actually has plans to help black people get into homes and also help the appraisals of black homes. He has an entire
so wait
tax
a second.
credit.
Get into homes for free? Like just
no, it's a tax. No, it's not nothing. Stop. It's not for free. It's not a handout. There's no handouts. But what he's offering is an actual program that will do something as opposed to nothing, right? So what he says here is that he's going to help families buy their first homes and build wealth by creating a new refundable advanceable tax credit of up to $15,000. He's going to tackle racial bias that leads to homes in communities of color being assessed by appraisers lower than their fair value. So he's going to create a national standard for housing appraisals. These are things that are actual tangibles that people don't want to talk about because we like to, just crap on the Democrats. But at least I like these things. These things make make sense because
It
we need to
makes
get.
sense, but again, how do you okay, you give me a tax credit to buy a home and then you make it so that you can't use any racial disparity against me when assessing the value of my home. Now we're talking about commerce, right? Because you're talking about buying and selling homes and making sure that Black people can do that and the value of their home is going to be legitimate and there's no race involved in judging that value of their home so that they could at some point sell their home and make money and increase their net worth. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Okay, but then you have the same argument that artificial intelligence is going to decimate society economically and nobody's going to be able to make a proper living. So who's going to be buying and
nobody
selling?
said nobody. Remember
well, okay, so then what is the argument then? Because on the one hand,
Well,
no,
first off,
listen. All right. Let's just
AI was the argument for Andrew Yang, not for Biden.
Do you follow what I'm trying to say? Can you follow what I'm trying to say?
Not really.
You make an economic pathway for Black people, but then at the same breath, you're saying the future is going to be such that we're going to be massively displaced economically because of artificial intelligence.
You're mixing two different candidates.
This is what I'm saying. You got to understand, right?
Well,
I don't think any initiative, right, or any agenda is going to benefit an entire group, right? It doesn't work like that. However, if enough of us could benefit from it, then it's worth investing in. You get what I'm saying? So then now,
I agree.
For example, right, like affirmative action, right, when it comes to like higher education, right? A lot of people were against it, right, including a lot of Black people. However, you never look at all of the successful people before you that benefited from affirmative action. And so you look at them like, oh, they worked hard. They're CFOs, they're this, they're managers, they're blah, 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 blah. They're doctors, they're engineers. All of them have benefited from affirmative action. Does affirmative action benefit every Black person in the inner city? No, because you still have to have some level of intelligence to get into those universities or what have you. However, those that got in are now afforded opportunities that they may not have had if affirmative action never existed. You see what I'm saying?
But isn't that still in the term of affirmative action? You're saying they may not have had. So the word may means there's a possibility that
there's a strong possibility they wouldn't have that opportunity. You gotta understand.
But I'm saying, what is the breakdown statistically of this? Like, how many Black Americans have been successful because of affirmative action versus not affirmative? Like, I think these numbers are important versus just saying blanketly, "Hey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna give this program. Some of you may be successful, some of you may not. That's it." But not look at if there's any cost.
How about this? At my previous job, right? I remember one time I had a luncheon. And I just happened to sit down next to like 3 major donors, right? They were all Black. There were 3 major donors of this university that I used to work at, right? And a guy was just talking to me because he thought I was in his fraternity, right? And so we're just chopping it up, whatever. And then he talked about how at the time the university had these different initiatives for local Bostonians, right? And he literally got to go to this school for free. That same program no longer exists today. But because of that program, this guy donates, I believe, what was it like? I think he says he donates 100-something thousand annually to this university, like proudly. And at the luncheon, he actually got an award for his philanthropy for this initiative or whatever. You know, that to me is a prime example. Like,
how many?
I don't know the many of those off the top of my head. You know what I mean? How many of those? But I'm pretty sure there's enough of those stories across the country that we could be like, all right, affirmative action actually did benefit African Americans.
Yeah, I think it's silly to try and make an argument that it has hindered African Americans. Yeah. When you look at the history,
but there are people who make that argument.
There's a history in this country of affirmative action helping white people more so because it was actually set up that colleges were meant for white males. So you're talking about decades, hundreds of years of this country where Black people literally couldn't get into schools. There's rejection notices from people that had from back in the day where it's like, sorry, we don't let Negroes into our institution. So now all of a sudden when we're like, look, the country's like, we've been wrong for all these years. We shouldn't have been doing that. Let's flip it the other way and actually help Black people. Now we want to have think pieces and talks and whatever about affirmative action helping Black people. So what are you talking about? For years and years, this country's had affirmative action for white people. And that's part of the reason why there's such a huge wealth gap. And now when we have Black people, let's give opportunity to Black people specifically, because when we give them an opportunity, now that guy, as G just said, who's a success story, can now become a success story and help somebody else up, right? Or at the very least, his family is changed now, right? That's the opportunity. But for some reason, what I love is white people who get all offended now. Oh, you gave my spot to some Black guy, whatever. It's like, bro.
Surprisingly, it's not white people getting offended.
It's the entire history.
White people suing Harvard. It's
Black
Asians.
people or Asian. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's Asian Americans who are looking at because are Asian Americans somehow? How did they become a higher class than Black people? Right. So they're looking at it as, well, wait a second, I'm not white. I didn't get any handouts or I didn't get any help, yet this person, just because they're Black, they're going to get placed before me. So
I can answer you. I can answer you.
Listen, I got a theory on that too, or at least, but
sorry, G, you actually work in higher ed, so you can go ahead. But I have an answer.
To be honest with you, all right. So, perfect example, like Harvard, right? So, I remember one time I read an article about I believe it was last year's freshman class. If in fact there was no stipulations on, the type of student that could come in, the entire freshman class was going to be all Asian students.
Yeah.
Meaning white students wasn't getting in, Hispanics weren't getting in, and Black students were not getting in. Do you understand? So now,
but what does that mean? What does that mean about Asian students?
Hey man, listen,
I think you're missing the point.
I don't think because I don't want to make it a minority versus minority divide, right? I think what it is is a cultural difference, right? So because of that cultural difference, because again, they're outperforming literally everybody now. Everyone, so like that's the problem. And on top of that, you have to factor in college is more than just academic excellence, right? So a lot of them, I just have to be honest, from my perspective, working in higher education for X amount of years thus far, right? A lot of these high-performing Asian students, they're antisocial. And on top of that, the highest suicide rates at MIT, at Harvard, and other universities across the greater Boston area are Asian students, because this is their first time ever receiving a B in their life. It's like stuff like that where it's like, okay, we could base it just off of, your ACT scores, SAT scores, GPA, but there's more to that, especially when you transition to the workplace. You could be academically sound, and yet you still can't, lead a presentation, lead a meeting, win an argument. You can't negotiate. There's a number of things that you have to factor in that are other talents, and hence that's why a lot of universities say, hey, are you an active student leader? Do you have a nonprofit? Do you have a business as a high school kid? Things of that nature, because they want to know, like, hey, you know what? On top of just being like glued to your books, you could do other things. And then when they see you doing a multitude of different activities, extracurriculars, when they see your grades, like, hey, you have like a 3.6, right? But you're doing all this other stuff in your community versus an Asian student that has like a 4.2 perfect GPA, but they're not involved on campus. You got to go
how often is that happening, right? You're making the assumption that every Asian has a 4.2 with no activity on campus.
No.
He's talking about the actual profiles of people that they're looking
at.
I am.
So then now, like, perfect example, right? There's a university in Boston, right? The average acceptance rate, like the GPA for that freshman class, it was last year, was actually a 4.2, right? On average. Amazing, and a lot of these universities are becoming more and more competitive. Well, in the process of becoming more and more competitive, what you're going to start seeing is one particular group rise to the top. And so to prevent that, because again, college should be about opportunities. If you're only awarding one particular group and negating all the other groups, then we're going to have the same issue all over again. It's just, instead of having white males, it's just going to be Asians now. You get what I'm saying?
And what happens when it becomes, okay, and if it moves in the direction of Black males?
I still would have an issue with it, because again, it shouldn't be just exclusively for one group.
Yeah. But are we talking about public institutions or private institutions?
Yo, Dre, I have a question for you, actually. If I can just interrupt real quick. I have a question for you. If we're looking for tangibles in this question, I'm curious, do we need to be looking for anything from any politician that we want leading our campaign, do you think we should be looking for anything? Because I feel like if we say our politician needs to have some tangibles for our community, you might just see it as a handout. But I guess the question is like, aren't they supposed to help somehow, or aren't they supposed to speak for us somehow? You know what I mean? So what do you think of?
I know. Well, what it is like there's so many groups. You have blacks, Asians, Latins, transgender, gay, women, and everybody that I'm leaving out. And they all want a politician to speak to them about their particular issue and do something for them and their particular issue.
Make it seem like a problem.
It's not about it being a problem, but you have this one individual, right? You'll have this one person. You have Biden, let's say, for example, or Trump. It doesn't matter who it is. And they're supposed to take on the problems and needs and wants of a myriad of groups of people, right? And at some point, doing something for one group is going to make the other group upset, and doing it for that group will make this group upset. And so it's like there really
isn't that the task of a president?
I mean, but
that's the job of a president.
That's not. I don't think that's necessarily the job of a president, which is to just satisfy every single group in the United States of America.
No. I don't think we're saying that.
I think, but they just said, isn't that the job of a president?
It's supposed to lead every single group. You're supposed to
lead every single group.
It's not you lead cater to every single group. It's not possible.
But you can't, exactly. It's not possible. Therefore, you need some type of baseline ideology or purpose that everybody can at least jive with, and everything else.
No, that's not even necessarily true. All you need is to outline a strategy that will get you into office. And if one group over the other will get you there, then you're going to lean towards that group, right? Because it's rare to see politicians run off of principle. They're all running about, how do I get into office?
Okay, so
I would say the black vote needs to empower themselves, right? We need to be a certified bloc and literally force these politicians
absolutely
listening to us.
So yo, was Diddy's words reckless? Just to throw this in there, was he reckless for saying that? Holding his vote?
Well,
I'll answer that question.
I feel like it's reckless in a sense that if you're saying blacks need to position themselves in a way to be able to be heard, right? What is that way that we have to position ourselves? Is it by simply saying, oh, I'm going to press the lever or not press the lever? That's not a powerful enough position.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree. So then now I would say, because again, we're talking about the economy, right? That's the real issue that a number of African Americans and black groups, that's like probably priority. People don't want to live in poverty, So we want a politician to say, hey, you know what? I promise I will do A, B, C, D, E, F, G for this community. Just the same as if, the LGBTQIA plus community is saying like, hey, we want, different marriage rights or different whatever rights, right? A politician goes, hey, I need their votes to get into office. I'm going to listen to them. I don't need my politician to like me. They could be racist. I'm being honest with you. Like, they could be racist as long as they listen to me. I'm telling you.
Okay.
Bro, it doesn't matter to me about
So listening is all that's required, not action?
No, listening is action. That's what I'm saying is, if I say, hey, you know what? I'll vote for, I don't know, let's say a local election, right? A person that's running for, I don't know, Massachusetts Senate or something. And they come to my neighborhood and they're saying, hey, I'm running and this is my platform. And the platform doesn't address me or anybody that represents me, right? I'm going to say, hey, why isn't this being mentioned? Or why aren't you going to this neighborhood? Why aren't you highlighting these agendas for this community? If they go like, yo, I don't really care about that community, cool. You're not going to get my vote. It's simple as that. Or they could be like, damn, fuck, I need this black vote. All right, you know what? Hey, G, what you need me to say? What you need me to do? I'll do whatever it takes.
You're literally setting up the premise for.
Bro, they're all like that. Why y'all pretending like we're children?
But I agree.
We're adults now. We're adults now.
But we're saying don't work with racist
adults.
People. We're saying
none of y'all work with a racist white person before.
I don't listen. Let me tell you something. If you have a certain lens that you look at the world in, you will look for that lens to validate your beliefs. Therefore,
Yeah, it's called confirmation bias.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so, I mean, the point of, to say, oh, haven't you ever worked with a racist white person?
No, what I'm saying is the reason why I pose that question is to show that, hey, in the real world, we deal with people who are racist, who are xenophobic, who are homophobic, who are transphobic. That's just the reality. They may not express it outwardly at work, but they think that shit deep down inside. And yet you still deal with them on a day-to-day basis. Okay. So for me saying, I don't care if my politician is racist as long as they abide by my agenda or my group's agenda. That's what I'm arguing.
But it's not possible. How do you do that?
How is it not possible? All right, let me, for example, I truly believe.
How can you listen to the evangelical Christians and then still listen to the Planned Parenthood?
Are you serious?
Groups?
Politicians do that shit all the time.
I'm not saying that they don't do it. I'm saying, is it successful? Is it a successful strategy?
It's working for Democrats. These same Democrats will fund Planned Parenthood and still go to church and pray with everyone else. What are you talking about?
And so therefore, let's look at society then. Is society good? Are we in a good position as society?
Oh, man, listen, man, you're talking to a guy that's not even religious. But what I do know is politicians will play any angle to get elected.
So then I don't understand. So if that's the case, they'll play any angle. They've done it. What are we arguing for then? This
is what I'm explaining, right? And this is the difference between, because you cut me off when I was building, right? Because another thing that we as a community need to do, we need to financially back a politician. That's when they listen. They're not going to listen to a bunch of people saying like, hey, we're going to give you our vote, right? Because they'll take your vote and do nothing in office because they're really, like, think about it. What they said, like, for a senator, right? It's like I think it was like 1.6 million. It's how much they have to spend on their campaign to actually get into Senate. If that's the case, bro, listen, a lot of communities they're not listening to. And hence, that's why a lot of them are bought by corporations, because corporations are funding their campaigns, whether it's individual donors or people of particular interest. They go like, hey, we'll put you in office, but we need a favor in return. They'll go to Black and brown communities and promise A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But if those same Black and brown communities aren't financially backing them, then most likely, thank you for the vote, but I gotta handle my business from this pharmaceutical company 100% or this oil company.
So how do we financially back these people to listen to better deliver the message that we're giving to them?
Amen. Well, I think it's actually a lot of small grassroots organizations that can actually help. Because the thing is this, a lot of Black people don't have a ton of money, right? And really, Black people need a lobby. This whole public, Diddy saying whatever. First off, I hate when we use a celebrity to talk about politics. Like, celebrities don't know anything about politics, and they shouldn't be driving the Black community's politics. But anyways.
Well, doesn't it say a lot that you make that statement, but doesn't that say a lot that Black people give these individuals so much power?
Celebrities?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I hate that. I hate that the conversation revolves around celebrities. I think it's completely misguided. Celebrities don't know what they're talking about, and half the time they're just saying whatever they feel. They're just a regular Joe. But it doesn't matter. That's fine. But my point is this: in terms of impact, right? There's actually a lot of voter apathy. People actually don't vote as much as we think. The turnout for elections is like super small. I mean, talking about from every level, city council to president, a lot of people don't vote. Really, the issue is apathy. And what really needs to happen is that the way we can combat big government, one, is to limit money in politics, which is mostly a Democrat platform, but limit the amount that can be donated into politics, right? Because we can't allow these corporations to just buy politicians. But then two is when you vote, the whole point of a politician is to get into office, right? And the only way they can get into office is voting. They use the money from politicians to market themselves. It's the marketing budget that goes on the TV ads, the radio ads, and whatever. But if people are going to vote against that, right? If you can get people to go show up and vote against that, then you get into power, and then you can actually do things. So you need a politician who's going to be useful. If we can't use you, you're useless. I don't want a politician. I'm not going to take a politician who's like G said, if you can't even look in my direction or do anything for me, it doesn't benefit me for you to be in power. But what all of us have is a vote. And if we can go out and use that vote strategically, we can get somebody who is going to do something. So that's why I said the conversation is actually too late when you're talking about the two Republican and Democratic candidates now. The issue starts from being engaged early on, having a candidate from the beginning who has the platform that you like, pushing a candidate forward, not just sitting back and taking whoever's there, and then pushing that person through.
Let me ask you a question. what were your feelings on Obama's presidency?